Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing a game I had on Tuesday. I believe that was the 2nd of February. And in this game I'm actually playing in a league, a tournament for NCL. But it's different to the 4NCL team league that I usually play in. So essentially every fortnight there's a team league match on a Tuesday, and in the weeks in between, so every 2 weeks as well, there is, I think, a 7-round tournament, and one game is played each Tuesday with time control being 45 minutes with a 15-second increment. I'm playing in the open, and in the first round my opponent is roughly in the middle of the field, a sort of 1800-ish player, sort of 1868 is their online rating. So I was expecting to win, but I shouldn't be too confident or arrogant. I could easily mess up somewhere. I was white, and we started off with a French defence with e4, e6, d4, d5. Knight d2, so I'm playing the Tarrasch French. Black has several options, but one of them that's quite rare is knight c6, with the idea being that you don't play pawn c5, but when or if white pushes their pawn up to e5, you attack it with the f pawn. Knight gf3, defending my d4 pawn. Knight f6, and here I have a couple of moves, but the one that seemed obvious to me was to attack the knight. So we're going into a classical French, except black has not yet played, or cannot play c5, and I've played the move knight d2, kind of inserted, also knight f3 inserted into the position. So now I play c3. My idea was to play bishop d3, and I don't want black's knight coming to b4 attacking the bishop. And c3 is also very thematic, because if or when black plays c5, I will already have a pawn defending d4. f6 as advertised, and if I take, black takes with the queen sometimes, then the bishop comes to d6 and I castle, developing all their pieces. Instead I chose bishop b5, so essentially black cannot take 3 times on e5 because one of their knights will end up being pinned. So after they capture once, I take back with the pawn. If they take with their knight, I take back with my knight, and they cannot recapture, so they will be losing a piece. Black goes bishop e7, and here I think I made a pretty poor move. I'd seen a few games recently at top levels where white decides to first bring their knight around to g3 and then castle, and it also releases my d2 bishop. But I should have castled straight away. Instead, knight f1 gives black enough time to organise their forces. Now my e-pawn is going to be attacked twice. Their king is no longer lined up with my b5 bishop. Queen e8 from black, so the queen will come to h5, attacking my pawn a third time. I prevent it with knight g3, improving the knight. And then a6. So here black forces me to make a decision. Do I take the knight or do I retreat? And in the end I was too attached to my bishop. Apparently the best move is to take. But I retreated, and then rook takes f3, a very thematic sacrifice. The only good thing is that I haven't yet castled, so I'm not yet committed to having a completely broken pawn structure near my king. The problem is, if I take with my queen, black takes on e5, forking my queen and bishop, so I'm going to end up losing the bishop pair as well. Therefore, I took with the pawn, and I think black should take with their d knight, not their c knight. But they wanted to play c5, I think. I saved my bishop. Then this move I'm not so sure of, bishop h4. I think bishop f6 was better. But the idea is that black wants to guard the e6 pawn with their queen, so that I don't have some tactical shot. I play bishop f4, and here I was thinking that bishop f6 was okay, but what I was interested in is if they play knight c4, interesting question is, do you take on c7 or do you castle on the queen side as white? What would you do? Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Way number one is that you take and they take, Then you can win the pawn back with bishop takes h7 check, discovered attack. When they take your bishop, you grab the knight at the end. So you do stay a pawn up, in this sequence at least. So that means that you won back the pawn you were losing by, and you're still the exchange ahead. So you're on material, you're up 2 points, which usually will be good enough. The thing is, though, I don't like my position here. My king will never really find any safety. Castling either way could be horrible. Maybe kingside's better just because I have more pawns over there. I've got all my pawns are isolated. They're not able to be defended by a pawn that's adjacent to it. So 5 isolated pawns is quite uncommon. And I've lost the bishop pair as well. And all that just to win a pawn. I don't like this. So instead, my plan was to not win the pawn and castle on the queen side. So my king will now be safe, my bishops are on the board, and I also have minor threats like rook takes d5, where their pawn on e6 is pinned because I would take their queen if they took the rook. So that was my idea. Bishop f6 though is played, and I played rook g1, lining up with their king, going for initiative. Black's move c5 is indicating they want to charge down the board on the queen side and control the centre. But regardless, I castle, because I need to have my king safe and my rooks connected. Castling seemed to achieve that very fast. Knight g6, attacking my bishop, and apparently my best move is to play bishop d6, controlling more squares on the dark squares, preventing black fully coordinating. I didn't see that. I played bishop takes knight because I win a pawn. Here I think it's worth winning the pawn, because there's not as many downsides. If black takes with their queen, they lose the e6 pawn. It won't be defended anymore. When they take with the pawn, having a horrible doubled pawn feature on their king side, I grab the d pawn. And again, their queen is in the wrong place. Now it's in the right place, but I will not let the rook be taken. This move is not ideal, really, rook d3. I should have played rook d1, but I was thinking perhaps I could double up rooks. c4, not the best move from black, but I understand their knight wants to come to c5, which the pawn was previously occupying. So now I find the right move. And black wins a pawn. Bishop takes c3, because if I don't take them, they've won a pawn, and when I do take them, they take my bishop on f4 check. And here, on points, I still am one point up, because black has an extra bishop and a pawn, which is worth about just over 4 points if you're trying to look at it in the most pure form. Bishops are usually worth a little bit more than 3 points. And I have a rook, which is, again, it's like worth 5, or if you're reading lots of books and grandmaster level, you might think a rook is slightly less, like 4.8 or somewhere around that. But I'm still ahead either way. And black does have an isolated e-pawn. My plan was to trade the queens, so my pawns are not doubled anymore if black takes. If black doesn't take, though, I can easily sort of go for the e-pawn and keep adding on more and more pieces to attack it. And also gain a lot of initiative with the queens on. So black thinks maybe they'll survive with only having a slightly worse material deficit. And then they come in with the knight to e5. So this improves their knight. It makes their bishop a little bit better as well. However, it also improves one of my pieces, my rook, coming to d8, check, pinning their bishop, attacking the king, and again improving a piece that is not ideal, my knight. Now we're both having knights in the centre of the board. I've got knight d6 on the horizon, trying to win the bishop on c8. So black has to be very, very careful, and they choose to play king e7, making it so that knight d6 would lose the rook. Now rook g8, so I go after another pawn. And if black plays king f7, trying to repeat and go for a draw, what do I play as white to win the game very quickly? I have the tactical shot, rook takes bishop. They have to take me back, and then knight d6 is a fork on the king and rook. So I'll be a rook up. Easy win. Instead, b5 is chosen, so it drops a pawn, but maybe black can hold with the rest of their pawns. Still becoming a challenge to hold this, because the king is now weak, the bishop and rook can't really move. Their knight's the only remaining piece black has that is in any way good. And I can keep improving with my rook on g1 and knight on e4. Black tries rook b8, perhaps aiming for rook b7 or bishop b7 in the future, but they're not going to get the chance. Rook g5 and knight f7. I was prepared to drop the pawn with knight f3 because I can just simply take. And if black does try to somehow get out of this, they're not going to be very successful. I have lots of ways of playing this. But if black, say, goes knight e1, trying to go knight d3 check, I have knight f6, and then they get knight d3 check, king d2, and almost no matter what they play, I don't think it does actually matter, I would, like even knight f4, I will play rook g8 and checkmate. So all my pieces attacking the king should win me the game. So knight f7 is the move. I take. Bishop b7 is unfortunately a blunder because I now go rook f6, winning the knight, and will win the game. And if black tries bishop takes knight with the sort of simple plan to attempt me taking the bishop, and then they do rook b7, I can first take the knight with check and then take the bishop, so I'll be ahead of rook. And finally, if black had tried rook b7 instead, which was also good, I still have rook f6, and there's not really many good ways of getting out of this for black. For example, king g8, what I do is I simply trade everything, taking all these pieces off, and then at the end I go knight d6, winning the bishop. Possibly there is a stronger way of doing this and of winning in some complex maneuver, but I can't be bothered to do that. I'll be up a bishop, up a knight, and I'll also be ahead on pawns as well, so it's a very, very simple way to win the game. But the final position was in fact when they played bishop b7 and rook f6 resigns. So overall, I was never really in too much trouble, although my knight f1 to g3 definitely cost me practically all my advantage. And when they were able to do that sacrifice, rook takes f3, I think the game was about equal. Where possibly if black played it a bit more accurately, I may have been on the back foot for a long time. Although I still would have fancied my chances against an 1800 to eventually turn the tables and win. So my next game in this league, this tournament I should say, will be in just over a week, and tomorrow will be my next 4NCL team match, where I will most likely be playing a FIDE Master or stronger. So thanks for watching this video, see you next time, bye.